The stories read like a fever dream. A Roman emperor wandering his palace at night, having whispered conversations with the moon. A commander ordering his elite legions to march to the coast, draw their swords, and stab the ocean to conquer the sea itself. This is Gaius Julius Caesar Augustus Germanicus, known to history as Caligula. For most of us, his name brings one specific story to mind: the absolute ruler of the known world attempting to make his favorite horse, Incitatus, a Roman senator. For 2 millennia, his 4-year reign has served as the ultimate historical shorthand. The consensus remains firm: giving a human being absolute power will drive them clinically, dangerously insane. But there is a glaring problem with that narrative. Running the Roman Empire required an incredibly complex, highly functioning bureaucracy. If the man at the very top was suffering from a debilitating psychotic illness, how did the machinery of Rome keep working so well? The archaeological record tells a different story than the history books. During his brief time in power, Caligula oversaw a wave of construction and public works that suggest a highly organized administration, not a paralyzed government. To meet the demands of a growing population, he initiated the expansion of Rome's water supply through extraordinary engineering projects, including the colossal Aqua Claudia and the Annio Novus. Evidence of this logistical sophistication exists in the Nemi ships, 2 enormous vessels recovered from an Italian lake in the early 20th century. These floating palace complexes were fitted with elaborate marble decoration and custom plumbing. Coordinating the construction of such unprecedented luxury platforms required a level of bureaucratic discipline that sits uncomfortably alongside the image of a man who had lost his grip on reality. This paradox forces us to reconsider the traditional mad emperor trope. What if Caligula's insanity was actually a highly calculated, terrifying political weapon? To understand Caligula, you have to look at how he survived his childhood. When he was a teenager, the paranoid Emperor Tiberius orchestrated the arrest and gruesome deaths of Caligula's mother and 2 older brothers. Caligula was then summoned to the isolated island of Capri to live with the man who murdered his family. Essentially a hostage, he survived by learning to perfectly mask his emotions. He showed no grief and no fear while living under the roof of a dictator. When he finally took the throne at 25, he inherited a massive political lie. The Senate still operated under the illusion that Rome was a republic, a cooperative government. In reality, it was a military dictatorship. Previous emperors maintained that polite fiction to keep the peace. Caligula decided to stop playing along. He weaponized what historians call visual power. He adopted a style of rule known as autocracy. Instead of using traditional senatorial channels, he bypassed the old elites entirely, making decisions on the fly and exercising his personal authority directly. His goal was a Hellenistic absolute monarchy. He didn't want to rule by consensus. He wanted to rule by public humiliation, forcing the Roman elite to visually acknowledge their own powerlessness. When you look at his reign through that lens, the famous myths completely change. Threaten them, my horse could do your job. The crossing of the bridge at Baiae signaled absolute wealth and control, turning an engineering feat into a performance of imperial command to terrify rivals. Even his god delusion had a purpose. He appeared in public dressed as Jupiter or Hercules, demanding to be treated as a deity. This aggressively signaled his elevation above the aristocracy, establishing his identity as a living god-king. These were calculated performances designed to remind the Senate of their absolute impotence. But there is a fatal flaw in the strategy of ruling by humiliation. You can only mock the men holding the swords for so long before they decide to use them. Tensions escalated rapidly. Caligula levied arbitrary taxes, revived treason trials to seize wealthy estates, and constantly insulted the officers of his own Praetorian Guard. The breaking point came in January of 41 CE. Cornered in a secluded palace corridor, Caligula was violently assassinated by a coalition of insulted senators and his own Praetorian guards. Caligula had successfully destroyed the polite illusion of the Republic. In return, the architects of that republic exacted a brutal physical revenge. With the emperor dead, the new regime faced an immediate political crisis. They had to legally and morally justify assassinating a sitting ruler. To do this, the Senate relied on historians like Suetonius and Cassius Dio. Writing for later regimes, these authors needed the Julio-Claudian emperors to look as monstrous as possible. They took Caligula's dark sarcasm, his ruthless autocracy, and his theatrical political stunts, and recorded them as literal medical insanity. Caligula's reign is a warning about absolute power, but his legacy provides a blueprint for how those who survive can weaponize history to justify a coup.